Hi, my name is Clark Burnett. I'm the manager of Culture Museums here in the city of Niagara Falls, and I wanted to take you on a little bit of a journey today. And it's a lecture that I originally developed for an exhibition called Industrial Niagara. That exhibition was supposed to take place at Rodman Hall and unfortunately didn't open to the public, so I thought I'd share it with you here today. What I do is I'd like to walk you through the impact of 3,160 tons of water flowing over a 57-meter drop that really ties into our industrial history of our city. What I'm really talking about is some early history, an attempt to harness this power, and what that industrial impact had on our community. But really, my talk is about great photographs, beautiful buildings, and huge construction projects that really changed the landscape of our city. Niagara Falls is about big history and big projects, and this is one of those stories. I will have a disclaimer. I am only talking about the Canadian side of things. There's a whole other discussion about the US use of power and how it changed their landscape dramatically. And from on the Canadian side, we really see that change very well when we're looking at the falls and the gorge itself. But I also want to say I'm definitely not an expert on hydroelectricity. There are engineers and industrial historians that know much more than I do. But what I want to do is show you the wonderful history that we have and the buildings that are still in our landscape and still you see today. I want to take us back a little bit and look at the fact that the speed and volume of water made it really difficult for early mills to spring up along the Niagara. There's just too much water and not enough ways to slow it down. The first mills in the Niagara region were on the 4 Mile Creek in present-day Niagara Lake. We see the Servoses, the Secords, and others setting up mills along this reliable stream that they control and harness. The work at what we now known as Bridgewater, which is present-day Niagara Falls, came a little bit later. Here's an early image of Burke's Mills, sitting near the brink of the falls. It's a wonderful setting to sort of see this wonderful development along this wonderfully unique landscape. Here you can see how he and Canby did this in the early 1800s. They set up mills by creating tail races in the river that can channel and control the river and the water of the mighty Niagara. By the 1860s, many hundreds of turbines were being set up in North America, and there was a real boom, with up to 1,000 horsepower capacity. This was shifting things from simple water wheels to larger projects. Hydroelectricity was introduced in the 1880s, which is about the time that Thomas Edison began manufacturing direct current electric generators, allowing multiple buildings in a district to be illuminated. The advent of electric generators spawned an increasing demand for electricity, and the need for sources of electric power followed. Where water power is close at hand, turbines were installed for the express purpose of driving electric generators for lighting, which is initially provided during the evening hours only. By the late 1800s, the generation of electricity of water power was well established. The early use of hydroelectric generation was limited by the capacity of the generating station, which was governed by the speed and volume of its water source, or by demand of electrical use near the station. Transmitting direct current electricity beyond a few kilometers was difficult since the amount of electricity decreased along the way. High voltage alternating current transmission, a faster method than direct current transmission and made possible by the development of commercially viable transformers in the 1890s, permitted transmission of electrical power over significant distances and made possible development of more remote hydroelectric sites. This is when Niagara Falls became the center of the power generation. The Ontario Power Company hydroelectric generating plant opened in 1905. This American-based company built its generating plant at the base of Niagara Falls, just above river level. The generation station worked as such. Water enters from a bay located 1.6 kilometers upstream of the falls, near Dufferin Islands, and is brought to the plant through buried conduit pipes and steel pin stocks, all of which are tunneled through the rock. The conduits, 2 steel and 1 wooden, are bound with iron hoops and encased in a cement run, 1,884 meters underground to the top of the generating station. There, each conduit connects with 6 penstocks, each 1.83 meters in diameter. At the point where the conduits and the penstocks join, there's a section which turns upwards into a spillway called a surge tank. Unfortunately, only one of these surge tanks exists today. They're located south of Queen Victoria Park Restaurant. The illumination battery is located on top of one of them. The 15 generators produced 203,000 horsepower of 25 cycle electric power. This plant has twice been flooded by ice and water in 1909 and 1938. Each time this happened, the plant was put out of service for many months. This picture shows the 1938 ice jam and the damage that it did. Next, we move the Canadian Niagara Power Company, the CNP, which was incorporated in 1892. Under the leadership of William Birch Rankin, the CNP built a hydroelectric generating plant which was located approximately 457 meters above the Horseshoe Falls. This hydroelectric power station was inaugurated as the William Birch Rankin Power Station and began to generate electricity on January 1st, 1905. The Rankin Power Station had two 10,000 electrical horsepower generators when it first opened. The principal investors in this project included the Rothschilds, J.P. Morgan, and John Jacob Astor IV, so just a bit of American influence on this station. The powerhouse is built on what used to be Cedar Island and takes advantage of the normal river current, which used to flow around the island. By 1927, the construction of the Rankin Power Station was completed. The final cost of the construction of this power station, including the installation of its 11 generators, was just over $5 million. The Canadian Niagara Power Company is the only Niagara Falls power company to remain privately owned through its history. It was initially affiliated to the Niagara Falls Power Company, and then in 1950, it became a subsidiary of the Niagara Mohawk Power Corporation. One can see the real dangers of these industrial projects working just mere meters away from the brink of the falls. One of our best ways of looking at early history we have is the diary of William Dalton. William Dalton was the caretaker at Rodman Hall Cemetery, and he took wonderful notes about some of the people that he buried there and gave us a wonderful legacy of them. And this is one that he wrote about an industrial accident that happened at the power generating plant. 22nd of September, 1912. William Grubb Stewart, aged 24 years, 3 months, and 8 days, son of Daniel Stewart, or Big Dan as he was called, was killed down at the Toronto powerhouse while working on a derrick lifting a heavy stone. The leg flew out and threw him down 60 feet on stones and killed him. He was a good worker and was well liked, and turned out a lot of people, and the firemen of which he belonged at the Falls View Brigade. We really see the impact of these things, and these big projects had a toll, and we see that in our cemeteries. Next, I move on to the Toronto Power Generating Station, or the Electrical Development Company. It began generating power in November of 1906 through the Toronto Power Generating Station. This power plant had an outlet tunnel which runs under the falls, leads out into the falls, and its time of use was the largest of its kind in the world. The EDC had received a franchise to develop 125,000 horsepower. Water was collected from the river by a wing dam, which extended 224 meters into the river. The water passed through the forebay and down through the steel penstocks. A 3.2 meter diameter tube led to the turbines. The station operated 11 turbines, which produced 11,000 horsepower each. The total power output was equal to 131,000 horsepower. The power station was eventually retired on December 31st, 1937. Lastly, we moved to the Ontario Hydro and Sir Adam Beck stations. And this was at the beginning of the 1900s. The Toronto Electric Light Company almost had a monopoly on supplying electricity to cities in Canada. This company was overcharging its customers for electricity and being selective as how much power a particular industry would get. On June 9, 1902, the Ontario Hydro Commission was formed, based on public opinions, public ownership, public control, and public distribution of electricity, which it was supported. The main problem that arose was that private franchises had been given out to 2 American companies and 1 Canadian company for power generation at Niagara Falls. It was during the Ontario provincial election of 1905 the main issue became Niagara Power. from the urging of Adam Beck, who was then the mayor of London, Ontario, the provincial Conservative Party ran an election platform of "Water power of Niagara should be free." The Conservative Party won the election, and the Premier James Whitney immediately announced that no further private franchises would be granted for the generation of hydroelectric power at Niagara Falls. Whitney brought Adam Beck into his government and named him the chairman of the newly created Ontario Hydroelectric Power Commission. It became the world's first publicly owned power authority. Initially, Adam Beck could not generate electricity. He could only buy and distribute it. The first major project of the Ontario Power Commission was to build a 110,000 volt transmission line from Niagara Falls to Toronto. The Canadian-based Toronto Electric Light Company already had a 60,000 volt transmission line from Niagara to Toronto, and the private company lobbied against the plans of this publicly owned commission. They were unsuccessful. And in November of 1908, work began on the Ontario Power Commission power transmission line. It was completed in October of 1910, when the first public power was switched on. The demand for power continued to rise, so construction of publicly owned hydroelectric generating plant would utilize the maximum drop in Niagara Falls was started at this point. So on New Year's Day, 1917, voters approved the construction of the Queenston-Chippewa Power Project. The construction began in May and continued for the next 4.5 years. The digging of the hydro canal was much harder than initially thought because of a couple of problems. Firstly, it was 20 kilometers long. Secondly, the power canal had to flow downhill, of course. An entire distance could generate the flow of water. But part of the route from Chippewa to Queenston was in fact uphill. To make this work, they actually had to reverse the flow of the Welland River. The powerhouse, when it was eventually built, was 180 meters in length. It was 41 meters wide and 18 stories in height. It consisted of 10 generators and cost $76 million to build. The construction started in May of 1917, and the water was turned into the canal on the 24th of December, 1921. And the project was originally known as the Queenston-Chippewa Power Plant. The benefits that this electricity brought was the increase of factories popping up in Niagara Falls. They could utilize access to electricity near the source. They also ranged tremendously. Some of the better known industries that we had popping up in the city were the Cyanamid factory, which was a chemical company which opened up in 1909. We also had the famous Nabisco factory that opened up in 1904, just after its sister factory in Niagara Falls, New York opened up in 1901. And then we also had Oneida, which was a silversmith making company that opened up in 1916 and had a long legacy here in Niagara Falls. And we see repeatedly lots of other businesses springing up as a result of this access to cheap electricity. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you understand the impact and the changing landscape that came around the impact of hydroelectricity on our city and the factories that sprang up. There's lots more to this story, and I hope you tune in for other ones. Thank you for watching, and check out all of our great videos on our YouTube channel and our website. Thank you.